Hi everyone. So I've been doing a lot of events recently, and one question I'm being asked a lot is about writing and if I've got any advice for writers. And it's one of the promises I made when I told you what I was starting this channel, that I would share some of my experience. So that's what this video is about. So this video is going to be about when you can call yourself a writer. It sounds very obvious, but calling yourself a writer, thinking of yourself as a writer, was for me was hugely important and actually was a really big gear change really on my journey to being a published writer, because those two things are different. I think when you think of writing as just a hobby or as something that you're doing on the side, not really taking seriously maybe, I think it can then feel very self-indulgent perhaps sometimes, and especially because you know we all have busy lives, and if you're going to fit in the serious endeavour of writing a novel around the rest of your life, something is going to have to give. If, for example, you're being invited to a party, say, or a friend's barbecue or whatever, it's difficult, or it can be difficult to say, I'm not going to come to that because I'm working on chapter 24. But that's something you probably will have to do, and I think it's easier to do that once you are taking it seriously. So I think if you're open and honest with people about your ambitions for your work, people are actually much more understanding about social events and so on and things that you might miss than they would be if you were just being very dismissive and treating it as a hobby. You don't need to be published to call yourself a writer, and that's really important. I remember when I was working on Before I Go to Sleep, the number of times I was at a social event or something, and somebody would say to me, "Oh, what do you do?" And I would say, "Yeah, I work in the health service, but I'm also a writer." And they'd say, "Oh, right, okay. What have you had published?" And I would say, "Nothing yet," because that doesn't mean you're not a writer if you haven't had anything published. Call yourself a writer now if that's what you want to do. You don't need to have finished a book either to call yourself a writer. So it's not even just about not being published yet. You don't need to have finished it. You don't need to have written the end. You don't need to have redrafted it. You don't need to have got it to the point where you've sort of closed down the Word document and have moved on to something else to call yourself a writer. If you're working on something, you're writing. So call yourself a writer before you've finished. Call yourself a writer before you've started, if necessary, because the writing process doesn't start when you first put pen to paper or fingers to keyboard to write the opening lines of chapter 1. The writing process starts well before that. When you're gathering material, when you're thinking about the topics that you want to write about, when you're thinking about the characters that you want to write about and the story that you want to tell, that's part of the writing process. Okay, I hope that's helpful. Go for it. Call yourself a writer. Go out there. Be proud of what you do. Take yourself seriously and see what happens.